Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And it does look like Xbox is expecting some new PlayStation consoles to release over the next 18 months or so. This does kind of lean into some of those rumors that we've been hearing about, but now we do have some price expectations and also maybe some ideas as to what Sony is currently planning. On top of that is one of Xbox's most beloved franchises officially dead. Well, at least according to some former Rare developers, they do believe that might be the case. I, however, do not agree with every statement made here, and I will explain why today. With all that said, though, you all know how this works. This is News Dose, where we go over various daily topics, so we do have a lot to get into, and with that, let's just go and jump right into our first topic of the day, being about the Zelda series. Now, of course, Nintendo just released Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and once again, as expected, it's had a ton of success. That might actually be putting it lightly here. But even with that, not every Zelda fan is necessarily thrilled with the direction that the series is going in. The more open-world Zelda games are quite a bit different than the classic style, which has a greater focus on puzzle elements, dungeons especially, and the use of various different items. So if you were maybe hoping for a return to that style of gameplay, well, the Zelda producer, Mr. Aonuma, was asked about whether or not they would consider a more classic Zelda game in the future, and so here was his response. It's difficult to say anything about the future. That being said, thanks to previous Zelda games, a game like Tears of the Kingdom now exists. This game originated from the ideas that we had in the past. We always tried to create something that offers more than previous titles. In that respect, we really aren't concerned with our older games anymore. We prefer to look to the future. Now, this does kind of line up with some of his previous statements as well, that Breath of the Wild created a new format for the series to continue on with in the future, which, honestly, if you think about it, this isn't really surprising whatsoever. With how well these games have sold compared to the classics, whether we love it or not, Nintendo obviously will continue to invest in this new format. So as of right now, currently as it stands, it does sound like this is what Zelda fans should expect with the next iteration of Zelda. That open world approach, once again, which I think for myself is bittersweet. I am not in the camp that thinks that the open world approach is better. I do prefer the classic games myself, as the dungeons are much, much better, and it's really not even close, to be honest with you. Now, what I will say is that Tears of the Kingdom was a big improvement on the Breath of the Wild formula. So you can see a clear path in how they can continue to improve this format. I firmly believe that they can further mesh the two styles together, just kind of go back to classic items, not those physics-based puzzles, and then put a bigger focus on dungeons. And then I think that they can kind of put these two formats together. Either way, it is what it is. I just hope that they can better mesh the two styles going forward, but let me know what you all think about this. Which do you prefer? The new, more open world Zelda games, or do you prefer the classics? Now, I think both are good, and I want that to be very clear, but I do greatly prefer the classic Zelda games. Speaking of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom's success, though, it has once again reclaimed the best-selling game in the UK, surpassing Final Fantasy XVI. Final Fantasy XVI did briefly hold the top spot in the UK with its launch on June 22nd, but as you can see here, Christopher Dring posted, Zelda sales are up 18% and is back at number 1 in the UK box charts, replacing Final Fantasy, which is down 78%. AEW is the highest new entry at number 3. So this is actually pretty impressive stuff for Zelda. This game has been out for more than a month now, actually close to 2 months by this point, and not only did it increase week over week, but it's also outselling the mega popular Final Fantasy series in just its second week, which launched, of course, on June 22nd. That goes to show you the legs of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, at the same time, though, there has been some questions for Final Fantasy XVI Online. Is a drop-off like this really good enough for Square Enix and Sony? And I actually don't see a major problem with the results here. A 78% drop-off from its launch week is pretty typical for most new releases. Really, the most important thing to kind of follow here is just how well it tracks on a weekly basis. Will its legs remain strong over time? The idea for a game like this is for it to consistently sell well over an extended period of time, and if it can do that, then it will go on to be a big success outside of just its launch. For that matter, keep in mind that it's already sold 3 million units worldwide, which, that's pretty impressive in its own right. Yes, it's not selling as fast as Final Fantasy 15, which sold 5 million units during its first week. But I think, if anything, that just kind of shows you the difference between a multi-platform and an exclusive release. Square Enix making Final Fantasy 16 exclusive, it is alienating a pretty big group of people, and that's going to show up in the data, as you are seeing here. Sony, though, will likely have paid a lump sum to make up for that difference in the exchange of its exclusivity. Oh, and for you Red Dead Redemption fans out there, rumors of a remaster is starting to swirl online. There's been some different supposed leaks of its existence for some time now, but the big clue here actually comes in the form of a new Korean rating. This was spotted by Gamatsu, and we've really seen this story kind of unfold time and time again over the last few years. I mean, how many times have you all heard me say this on the channel? More often than not, when a rating like this pops up online, an announcement comes soon thereafter. So with that in mind, there is a chance that a Red Dead remaster will be announced before the end of 2023. Now, if I were to speculate myself, the first place to kind of keep an eye on here would probably be Gamescom, which is set for actually next month. If this remaster does exist, and if it's set for a quote-unquote soonish announcement, Gamescom would make the most sense, where a large audience will tune in. I think really the big question here, though, is that if any of this is true, and if this game does actually exist, how much effort are we going to see with a remaster? Is this just going to be some kind of simple resolution and frame rate bump, or instead are we going to see something a little bit more involved, maybe bringing it more in line with what we saw with Red Dead Redemption 2? I mean, I guess we'll see, hopefully soon, but this is one of the most requested remasters out there, especially after the success of Red Dead 2, so hopefully this game will be announced soon. All right, so let's go and talk about this Xbox and PlayStation situation, though. Over the last week, as part of the Activision Blizzard case, a lot of confidential information has surfaced online. Everybody's dirty little secrets is finding their way online, but one very interesting piece of information actually fits right in line with some previous leaks that we've talked about on this channel. Some new PlayStation 5 consoles. This was first leaked by Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson, which has proven to be very, very accurate time and time again, and he claimed that Sony has 3 new consoles in development. One is a new PlayStation 5 with a detachable disc drive set to release later this year. Then a PlayStation 5 Pro may be slated for next year, and then lastly, a remote play handheld, which of course has already been confirmed. Go ahead and mark that as another win for Tom Henderson. Well, interestingly enough, though, Xbox fully suspects these consoles are indeed real. As part of the court documents filed, whilst they were comparing prices for various consoles currently on the market, they also noted that, quote-unquote, PlayStation likewise sells a less expensive digital edition for $400 and is expected to release a PlayStation Slim later this year at the same reduced price point. Now, this is quite interesting in the aspect that it seemingly further confirms Tom Henderson's previous report. This supposed PlayStation 5 Slim is believed to completely replace the current PlayStation 5 SKUs. So what that means is, from this point forward, there will only be one PlayStation 5 model that you can buy, a digital PlayStation 5 console for $400, though you will have the option to attach a disc drive if you want. Now, I actually do believe that this is a better setup than what they currently have right now, and the reason I say that is because it allows consumers to adopt the PlayStation 5 at their own pace. I think with the PlayStation 5 digital as is, one of the problems with this console is that there is a chance consumers will regret their purchase, especially if they previously owned a PlayStation 4 with a physical library of games. I mean, there for a while, the PlayStation 5 was very difficult to get, and a lot of people actually had to buy the digital version because that's all they could get. So in that situation, if you get a digital edition, you're just kind of stuck with those digital-only games, and if you had a prior physical library with the PlayStation 4, well, then you just can't take advantage of the PlayStation 5's backwards compatibility unless you re-buy those games digitally. I mean, even with the Xbox Series S, and I can actually relate to this. We bought our daughter an Xbox Series S while it was on sale. I think we got it for like $170 or something like that, which, I mean, that's a pretty fantastic deal. But I wish there was an option to buy a disc drive, because I have a large physical library that I could let her play. Instead, though, I have to go out and purchase digital games for her that we already own. So, this detachable disk drive would be an improvement, I think. And I hope with Xbox knowing this information, I mean, as we kind of see here, or at the very least, they're suspecting it, I kind of hope that they're also investing in their own option to kind of counter this. As I always like to say, competition breeds excellence, and that's what I want to see here, that competition really makes for better consumer options. Xbox, though, they weren't finished with their report there, though, as they also noted that they believe Sony is preparing a PlayStation 5 Pro model as well. Again, this was already rumored for a 2024 release, but to see Microsoft support that rumor is quite significant. I'm sure the two has at least some idea of what each other are kind of working on, but I also think that reflects on Phil Spencer's recent comment. He mentioned that Microsoft doesn't have current plans for an upgraded Xbox Series, but if they already know Sony has plans for their own upgraded PlayStation 5 model, I imagine Microsoft, at the very least, is working on their own counter if needed. I mean, if they are, I do believe that it will release later than the PlayStation 5 Pro, just like what happened last generation. But hey, with this news here, it sounds like Sony is quite busy with several consoles possibly coming here soon. In fact, we can't forget about their Remote Play handheld, and apparently, Microsoft expects it to release at $300 or less. I mean, honestly, it better is all I can kind of say here. It should be less than $200 realistically. But I think the reason that they brought this up is to really just further give proof that Sony and Nintendo are competitors with the Nintendo Switch. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you like the idea of a detachable disk drive with how the current market works with digital-only consoles? Moving on, though, and this one's going to be painful for me to talk about, because some of the former Rare team in an interview with the Video Game Chronicle said that they're not expecting a new Banjo-Kazooie title anytime soon. Yes, just imagine a sad face, because that's what I'm giving right now. But I do think it's kind of important to understand here that these are former Rare developers. So this is not a confirmation, but just considering their connection with Rare, their opinions do hold at least some form of weight to them. And that's why players are taking these comments quite seriously. I do, however, very much disagree with some of the things that they said here, and I'll just get into that in a moment. But Grant Kirkhope, the composer for Banjo-Kazooie, questioned if there's even a team that could pull off a new Banjo game, and whether or not there's actually an audience big enough to merit a new Banjo title for modern times. You can see here where he said, "I feel like you'd have to get a team with that humor that we had back then, and that's hard to replicate. I think Rare would be open to somebody if they found the right team, but I don't feel like that team exists. Also, I'm not convinced the audience is there either. I don't feel like there are that many Banjo fans out there." Now, I cannot tell you how much I disagree with both of these statements. It seems like some of the Platonic team, which, they are made up of former Rare developers, in this interview, they did kind of echo this sentiment, but in my own opinion, I do believe that there is a studio out there. I actually already have one in mind. I'll get back to that in a moment, but I do believe that there is a team capable of making a new Banjo game, and more so, I think that there's a huge audience that would play a new Banjo game. This is what Xbox Game Pass is all about. Xbox Game Pass has really opened up a lot of opportunities for Xbox as a creative publisher. They can put these games out there that might involve a little bit more risk and get a lot of people playing them. I mean, they have big games like Starfield and Hellblade 2. We know this. But they also have games like Hi-Fi Rush, they have Grounded, and even something like Pentiment. These games have seen success as smaller, new IP, and that right there is the key words here, new IP. Banjo is not a new IP, so not only does it have a fan base, whether it's big or small, that would buy into a game like this, but you also have all of these new customers that would try something out like this. So I think this is an absolute no-brainer. It would have a ton of success releasing into Game Pass, and I also think it's a game that could drive real growth for something like Xbox Game Pass, as, this is not a new IP. It does have some hardcore, passionate fans out there, many of which are on Nintendo's platform. So this could draw a lot of attention from Nintendo fans as well. Now, I will, however, say that I do agree with their opinion about doing a new remaster of sorts to test the waters before making a brand new title. That's something else that they brought up in this interview, and they suggested that a completely new game is hard to make, and, it also requires a lot of money. So I do understand where they're coming from with that sentiment. But as for them suggesting that Banjo might not have a big enough audience, that's where I'm going to kind of push back here, because we've already seen some evidence that there is absolutely an audience for these type of games. No, they're not going to be the best-selling games like they were back in the 90s. They're not going to go out and, put up Call of Duty numbers or anything like that. I mean, I get that. But we have seen the reaction for Banjo in Smash, which was massive. But that's not even what I'm talking about here. Look no further than the Crash Insane Trilogy and Spyro Reignited. Both of those collections had a lot of success, especially Crash Bandicoot. So you're telling me that those games can have success, but Banjo can't? I'm not buying that. So again, a Banjo recreated collection, to me, is an absolute no-brainer. And for that matter, there's a very real chance that Microsoft might own the publishers that recreated those games: Activision, Toys for Bob, and even Vicarious Visions, which is buried somewhere within Activision. Still such a shame that team has been buried, but, nonetheless, come on. Toys for Bob, they could work on Banjo. So I'm just going to go and leave this topic there. While I think that there was some interesting insights in this interview, I do not agree that there's not a big enough audience for these games. Rather, I am in firm belief that I think it is the perfect time for a Banjo return that utilizes Xbox Game Pass. That's what it's all about. Take the risk and see what happens. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all who will win the Activision Blizzard preliminary injunction court case. And yeah, as you can see here, most of you do expect Microsoft to win, the vast majority actually in this case. And I mean, really just based on their trial hearing last week, Judge Corley, she did seem to favor Microsoft's argument in most aspects. She did seem a little bit iffy on cloud gaming, but outside of that, she really seemed to side with Microsoft on most points. So, yeah, I'm with you all on this one. There's no guarantee. Maybe she comes out and surprises us, but just based on my own opinion, I do believe the FTC will be denied their preliminary injunction maybe sometime this week. Now, I actually made a video about this last week, so you can check that video out if you want a more in-depth reason as to why I believe this. But, I mean, as you can see here, I think if the FTC wins, that would surprise most people, because the FTC, they didn't exactly offer a great argument in the grand scheme of things. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, do make sure to hit that bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. But with that said, until next time, peace out.